Do you know the exact moment a marriage actually dies? It is not when you find lipstick on a collar. That is too cliché, too common. No, for me, it was this morning. It was the moment Mark, my husband of 3 years, tossed a crumpled fiver onto the kitchen table like he was tipping a waitress at a roadside diner. He looked at me, in my tatty old grey cardigan, with eyes full of absolute disgust. He said, "Sarah, buy yourself something decent for once. You look like a cleaner. And do not wait up. I am taking Chloe to the Sterling Group annual gala." He stood there, adjusting his silk tie, a tie that cost £200, a tie he thinks he bought on sale, but which I actually paid for with my black card, just so he could feel successful. He puffed out his chest and told me tonight is the night. Tonight he finally meets the mysterious chairman of the Sterling Group, the shadow CEO, the brilliant mind he worships. He says if he charms the chairman, he will be regional director by midnight. And then he will finally have the money to divorce his boring, frumpy wife. I looked at that crumpled £5 note. I did not cry. I did not scream. I just picked it up and smoothed it out. Because Mark does not know the truth. He does not know that the Sterling Group belongs to me. He does not know that the house he sleeps in, the car he drives, and the job he is so proud of are all charities I gave him. He wants to meet the chairman. Oh, he will meet her, but he will not be getting a promotion. He will be getting the most public, brutal sacking in the history of London. My name is Sarah Sterling, and tonight my husband dies. Metaphorically speaking, of course. Do you want to see a cheater lose absolutely everything in front of 500 people? If you are ready for the revenge, comment number 1 right now to watch the full story. Trust me, you do not want to miss the look on his face. The rain in London has a very specific sound when you are poor, or at least when you are pretending to be. It taps against the single-glazed windows of our terraced house like a rhythmic reminder of everything my husband hates about his life, and specifically everything he hates about me. I stood by the toaster, inhaling the smell of burnt bread. It was the cheapest loaf from the corner shop, the kind that turns to dust in your mouth. I was wearing my grey woolen cardigan. It is 3 sizes too big and smells of old lavender and despair. I bought it from a charity shop in Shoreditch specifically for this role. Mark hates it. He says it makes me look like a retired librarian who has given up on joy. He is not entirely wrong. The kitchen doors swung open and Mark stormed in. He was already sweating, even though it was only 7 in the morning. He was wrestling with his cufflinks, the gold ones I anonymously gifted him for his birthday last year, using a shell company. He thinks they are from an admirer. He looked at the burnt toast on the plate, and then he looked at me. His upper lip curled in that familiar sneer. He said, "For God's sake, Sarah, can you not even manage to make toast without causing a disaster? The whole house smells like carbon. It is clinging to my suit." I kept my head down, playing the part of the submissive, terrified housewife. I whispered, "I'm sorry, Mark. The dial on the toaster is broken. I will scrape it off for you." He laughed, a short, sharp bark of a laugh, devoid of any humour. He said, "Scrape it off. That is your solution to everything, isn't it? Make do and mend. You are so embarrassing. Do you know what David's wife does in the morning? She goes to Pilates. She runs a boutique. She looks like a woman who belongs in the 21st century. You look like something I picked up at a car boot sale." I felt a flash of cold heat in my chest. David's wife. I know her. I approved her small business loan application 3 months ago when her boutique was about to go bankrupt. But Mark does not know that. Mark sees only the surface. He walked over to the mirror in the hallway, admiring his reflection. He smoothed down the lapels of his navy suit. It is a Savile Row bespoke suit. He told me he bought it off the rack at a high street store because he is a savvy shopper. In reality, I instructed the tailor to switch the labels and charge him 10% of the actual price. I paid the rest. I have been subsidizing his ego for 3 years. He turned back to me, checking his watch. A Rolex, another gift from me that he thinks he earned. He said, "I am leaving. I have a breakfast meeting with the investors before the gala tonight. This is it, Sarah, the big league. The chairman is going to be there. I need to be sharp. I need to be surrounded by winners, not whatever this is." He gestured vaguely at me, at the kitchen, at our life. He continued, "Do not wait up. I am taking Chloe. She knows how to hold a conversation with the elite. You would just stand there and talk about coupon clipping. It would be social suicide." He grabbed his briefcase and opened the front door. The grey London rain swirled in. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't kiss me. He just looked at me one last time with pity. He said, "Try not to burn the house down while I am gone, although it might actually improve the value." The door slammed shut. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was not sad. It was electric. I walked over to the window and watched him get into his leased Mercedes. I waited until his taillights disappeared around the corner. The submissive housewife vanished. My posture straightened. The slump in my shoulders disappeared. The dull look in my eyes was replaced by the cold, hard stare of a woman who runs an empire. I picked up the burnt toast and dropped it into the bin. Then I reached into the pocket of my tatty cardigan and pulled out a sleek, encrypted smartphone. I dialed a number that Mark does not even know exists. It rang once. I said, "Sebastian." The voice on the other end was crisp and immediate. "Good morning, Madam Chairman. Are we proceeding with the plan?" I looked around the shabby kitchen one last time. I looked at the peeling wallpaper. I looked at the cheap kettle. I looked at the life I had built to test the man I thought I loved. The test was over, and he had failed spectacularly. I said, "Prepare the helicopter. I am tired of playing this role." Bringing the car around to the back alley. "And Sebastian, bring the velvet gown, the black one. We're going to a party." 3 years ago, Mark was not a branch director. He was a bog-standard junior sales executive who could not sell a heater to an Eskimo. I remember coming home one evening to find him slumped over the kitchen table, surrounded by crumpled balls of paper, crying into a glass of cheap whiskey. He told me he was going to be fired because he could not draft a coherent quarterly strategy. He showed me his draft. It was not just bad, it was a tragedy. It was written with the vocabulary of a 12-year-old and the logic of a concussed pigeon. He had spelled acquisition with a K. He had calculated the profit margins using simple addition instead of percentage growth. It was a suicide note for his career. I told him to go to bed. I told him I would tidy up the kitchen. But the moment his snoring started rattling the floorboards, I sat down at his laptop. I did not just tidy up. I rewrote the entire thing. I used my knowledge of the Asian markets. I projected the currency fluctuations of the pound against the yen. I turned his childish scribble into a masterclass of corporate strategy. The next day he came home beaming. He said the board was blown away. He said he was a natural genius who just needed to focus. I just smiled and poured him his tea. That was how it started. For 3 years, I have been the ghostwriter of his success. Every major speech he gave, I wrote it while he was watching football. Every crisis he solved, I was the one pulling the strings from the shadows. But I knew Mark. I knew he was all ego and no substance. He would trip over his own shoelaces if left alone. So I sent him a babysitter. I hired David, a brilliant Oxford graduate, and placed him as Mark's executive assistant. Mark treats David like a glorified servant. He makes David fetch his dry cleaning and coffee. He does not know that David reports directly to me. David is there to whisper the right words into Mark's ear during meetings. David is there to kick Mark under the table when he is about to say something stupid. Mark walks around the office with his chest puffed out, thinking he is the wolf of Wall Street. He thinks he climbed the ladder. He does not realize I built the ladder. I held the ladder, and I pushed him up every single rung with my own hands. My phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking my train of thought. It was a text from David. I opened it and read the message. Madam Chairman, Mark has just printed out the revised merger proposal you sent him at 2 a.m. He is currently showing it to Chloe in his office. He is telling her that the idea came to him in a vision while he was meditating. Chloe is very impressed. She called him a visionary. I stared at the screen. A visionary. My husband is not a visionary. He is a plagiarism machine in a polyester blend suit. He is using my brain to seduce his mistress. If you want to see exactly what happens when the true visionary takes back her work, then comment number 1 right now. It is time to turn off the autopilot and let him crash. Last Tuesday was our 3rd wedding anniversary. 3 years. Traditionally in England, the 3rd anniversary is leather. It represents durability and warmth. In my marriage, however, it was the discount appliance anniversary. Mark came home late, smelling of expensive perfume that definitely was not mine. He tossed a cardboard box onto the kitchen counter. It landed with a heavy, unromantic thud. He said, "Happy anniversary. I saw this and thought of you." I opened it. It was a blender, a Smoothie Master 3000 to be precise, and there, right on the front of the box, was a neon orange sticker that he had not even bothered to peel off. It read, "Reduced to clear, £20. He said, "It is for your health, Sarah. You have let yourself go a bit lately, haven't you? Maybe make some kale juice. Try to look a bit more presentable for me." I ran my hand over the cheap plastic casing. I smiled, that practiced, vacuous smile I have perfected over the last 3 years. I said, "Thank you, Mark. It is just what I wanted." He nodded, satisfied with his own generosity, and went upstairs to shower. He needed to wash off the scent of his mistress before bed. Once the water was running, I picked up his phone. It is adorable how he thinks his passcode is secure. 1, 2, 3, 4. The mind of a strategic genius. I opened his banking app. I do not need to steal his money. I own the bank. But I like to see how he spends the allowance I secretly funnel into his account. And there it was. A transaction made at lunchtime. £12,000. Hermes. My heart did not break. It hardened. He bought a £20 blender for his wife, and he bought a £12,000 Birkin bag for the girl he has been sleeping with for 3 months. But then I looked closer at the item code on the receipt. I recognized it immediately. I almost laughed out loud in the quiet kitchen. Mark thinks he bought Chloe a rare, limited edition piece. He thinks he is showing off his wealth and taste. But I know that bag. I know it intimately, because I was the one who ordered it to be destroyed. It was from the Sunset Glaze collection we commissioned 4 years ago. The dye was unstable. Under direct sunlight, the leather turns a sickly shade of radioactive orange within a week. We recalled the entire line. We sold the rejects to a third-party liquidator in the outskirts of Essex just to get them out of our warehouses. We jokingly called it the pumpkin disaster in the boardroom. And Mark, my tasteless, arrogant husband, had hunted one down and paid a premium for it, thinking it was vintage. He is going to give his mistress a bag that will turn the colour of a traffic cone the moment she steps outside. It is poetic justice. He is trying to buy class with money he does not have, on goods that are essentially industrial waste. I plugged in the blender. I threw in a handful of strawberries. I stared at the sharp metal blades at the bottom. I imagined Mark's career in there. I imagined his reputation. I imagined his ego. I turned the dial to maximum speed. The noise was deafening, a high-pitched scream of machinery tearing soft flesh apart. I watched the fruit disintegrate. I watched it turn into a red, formless pulp. It was violent, it was loud, and it was absolutely satisfying. I whispered, "Keep blending, darling. It is almost pulp." The knock on the door was not polite. It was aggressive. It was the knock of someone who believes they own the world simply because they bought a new pair of shoes. I opened the door, and there she was, Chloe. She looked like she had been dipped in glue and rolled through a glitter factory. She was wearing a dress that was too tight for the daytime and too short for decency. She chewed gum with her mouth open. She held a manila folder in her manicured hand like a weapon. She did not wait to be invited in. She pushed past me, her heels clacking loudly against the cheap laminate flooring of my hallway. She wrinkled her nose as if she had just stepped into a sewer. She said, "Oh God, it smells like wet dog and poverty in here. How do you live like this? It is depressing." Mark told me it was bad, but I did not realize it was this tragic. I closed the door slowly. I did not raise my voice. I channeled the icy calm of my grandmother, the late Countess of Stirling. I said, "Can I help you, miss? Or do you make a habit of breaking into strangers' houses to critique their air quality?" Chloe laughed. She tossed her hair back. It was extensions. I could see the bonds showing near the scalp. Poor quality application. She said, "I am not a stranger, darling. I am Chloe, Mark's executive assistant. He left these files, important business. He is too busy being a superstar to come back to this dump, so he sent me. He said you would be here, washing dishes or whatever it is you do." She walked into the living room and sat down on my sofa without asking. She crossed her legs. She looked me up and down. Her eyes lingered on my baggy grey cardigan and my bare face. She said, "Wow, you really have let yourself go, haven't you? No wonder Mark stays late at the office. Look at you. You look like his mother." Actually, that is an insult to his mother. You look like the help. I stood perfectly still. I looked at her. I really looked at her. I dissected her with the precision of a surgeon. I said, "That is a fascinating observation coming from a woman wearing those shoes." Chloe looked down at her feet. She smirked. She said, "Like them? They are Louboutins, £700. Mark bought them for me. But I suppose you would not know what that feels like, a man spending money on you." I walked closer. I lowered my voice to a whisper, almost conspiratorial. I said, "You should ask for a receipt, because those are not Louboutins." Chloe's smile faltered. "Excuse me?" I pointed at the heel. I said, "The arch pitch is incorrect. Christian Louboutin designs his heels to have a specific 120mm vertical pitch to elongate the calf. Yours are barely 100. And the sole? Look at the red lacquer. It is peeling at the edges. Authentic Louboutin lacquer chips. It does not peel like cheap plastic. And the stitching on the toe box is uneven. It is a high street knockoff, a very expensive fake, just like the man who bought them for you. Chloe pulled her feet back, tucking them under the sofa. Her face turned a bright, furious red. She spat. "You are just jealous. You are a bitter old frump. You know nothing about fashion. Mark loves me. He tells me everything. He says you are boring. He says you are dead weight." She stood up. She grabbed the cheap vase on my mantelpiece and sneered at it. She said, "Look at this junk. Everything in here is garbage, just like you." She dropped the vase. It shattered on the floor. I did not flinch. That vase was a Ming Dynasty replica worth £5, but she did not know that. She thought she was breaking my heart. I said, "In my world, we have a saying. You can buy a suit, but you cannot buy breeding. Manners are free, Chloe, yet you seem to be bankrupt." Chloe stormed towards the door. She felt small, she felt exposed, and she hated me for it. She turned around one last time, her hand on the doorknob. She wanted the last word. She needed to hurt me. She said, "You can say whatever you want, but tonight at the gala, Mark is going to be a king. And a king deserves a queen, not a servant, not you." She slammed the door. The house shook. I looked at the closed door. I looked at the silence she left behind. A queen. She thinks Mark deserves a queen. I walked over to the shattered vase and picked up a shard of pottery. I smiled. It was a genuine smile. I thought to myself, "Be careful what you wish for, little girl. You want a queen? You are about to meet one. And the first thing a queen does is execute the traitors." Do you want to see the moment the queen takes off her mask? Comment number 1 to keep watching. Rotations. Mark has always believed that perception is reality. In his small mind, if you look like a millionaire, you are a millionaire. And for the Sterling Group gala tonight, he decided that looking like a millionaire was not enough. He needed to look like an oligarch. He spent the afternoon pacing around the living room, making frantic phone calls. He was desperate. He had realized that his leased Mercedes E-Class was simply too pedestrian for the night he was about to have. He wanted a Rolls-Royce Phantom, and not just the car. He wanted a Patek Philippe watch. He wanted to walk into that ballroom and have the shadow CEO look at him and see an equal. The problem, of course, was liquidity. Mark lives paycheck to paycheck because he spends every penny on suits and dinners for Chloe. He has no savings. His credit rating is mediocre at best. I sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of Earl Grey tea, watching him panic. He shouted into his phone, "What do you mean declined? Do you know who I am? I am a director at Sterling Group. Check the figures again." He slammed the phone down. He muttered, "Useless idiots. Banks have no vision. I just need £50,000 for 24 hours. Once I get that promotion tonight, I can pay it back 10 times over." I took a sip of tea to hide my smile. He was desperate, and desperation makes people stupid. I watched as he opened his laptop and navigated to a website called Obsidian Trust. It is a private lending firm that specializes in high-risk loans for corporate climbers. It looks very exclusive, very glossy. What Mark does not know is that Obsidian Trust is a tactical front. It is a private holding vehicle registered in the Cayman Islands, which is owned by a blind trust in Zurich, which is owned by me. I pulled out my phone under the table. I logged into the admin portal of Obsidian Trust, and there it was, a loan application from Mark Reynolds. Amount, £50,000. Purpose, business investment. I tapped the screen. I opened the terms and conditions editor. I decided to add a special clause just for him. Clause 4B, the immediate recall clause. It stated that the entire loan plus 40% interest must be repaid immediately in full if the borrower's employment status changes for any reason: resignation, redundancy, or termination. I approved the application. Across the room, Mark's laptop pinged. His face lit up like a child on Christmas morning. He shouted, "Yes, finally, someone with a brain. They approved it, Sarah. 50 grand. Look at this." He shoved the screen in my face. He said, "Obsidian Trust. Now this is a serious lender. They understand potential. The interest rate is a bit high, but who cares? By tomorrow morning, I will be running the whole region. This is pocket change." I looked at the screen. I looked at the digital contract waiting for his signature. I said, "Are you sure about this, Mark? That looks like a lot of money to borrow just for a party. Have you read the small print?" He scoffed. He actually rolled his eyes at me. He said, "Small print is for poor people, Sarah. Winners do not read contracts. Winners sign them. You worry too much. That is why you are still here, and I am going up there." He sat down and typed his name with a flourish. Mark Reynolds. He clicked submit. Within seconds, the funds were transferred to his account. He jumped up, punching the air. He said, "Done. I am going to rent the Phantom, and then I am going to Bond Street to get that watch. Chloe is going to flip when she sees me." He grabbed his car keys and ran to the door. He paused for a second, not to thank me, but to gloat. He said, "This is it, the turning point. Just wait. When I come back tonight, I will be a made man." He slammed the door and sprinted to his car. I sat there in the silence of the kitchen. I looked at my phone. The Obsidian Trust app showed the loan status, active. The clock had started ticking. He thinks he just signed a loan agreement. He thinks he just bought a ticket to the high life. He does not realize that he just signed his own death warrant. He has leveraged his future against a job he is about to lose in less than 6 hours. When I fire him on that stage tonight, clause 4B will trigger. The debt will be called in instantly. He will not just be unemployed. He will be insolvent. He will be destitute. I finished my tea. It tasted particularly sweet. I stood up and walked to the window, watching him speed away to rent a car he cannot afford, to impress a woman he does not know is his executioner. I whispered, "Drive safe, darling. You have a big night ahead of you." 2 hours before the limousine was due to arrive, Mark returned to the kitchen. He was holding a thick manila envelope. He did not look at me. He looked through me. He threw the envelope onto the table. It slid across the cheap laminate surface and stopped right in front of my cold cup of tea. He said, "Sign it." I did not need to ask what it was. The word divorce was printed in bold at the top of the first page. He adjusted his cufflinks nervously. He said, "I want this done before tonight, Sarah. I am about to step into a new life, a life of wealth, a life of power. I cannot have you dragging me down. I cannot have you claiming half of my future earnings. I want a clean break." I opened the document. I scanned the clauses. It was brutal. He was demanding a complete separation of assets. He wanted the car. He wanted the savings account. He wanted to pay 0 spousal maintenance. He was essentially throwing me out onto the street with nothing but the clothes on my back. He watched me read, tapping his foot impatiently. He said, "Do not bother getting a solicitor, Sarah. You cannot afford one. And do not try to fight me. If you sign now, I will let you keep your wedding ring. If you fight me, I will crush you. I will have the best lawyers in London on my payroll by tomorrow morning." I looked up at him. His greed was so naked, it was almost innocent. He was trying to protect a fortune he did not yet have, from a woman who already owned everything. I picked up a pen. It was a cheap blue biro lying next to the shopping list. I said, "You want me to sign away my rights to your future success, Mark? Is that it?" He sneered. "I am just protecting my assets, Sarah. It is just business. Chloe and I, we are the future. You are the past." I did not hesitate. I did not cry. I did not ask for a second chance. I pressed the pen to the paper. Usually, when I play the role of the housewife, I sign my name with a small, shaky hand, hesitant, weak. But not today. Today, I let the mask slip just for a fraction of a second. I signed my name with the flourish of a CEO who has signed billion-pound merger deals. Sharp, decisive, aggressive. The ink flowed onto the paper like a command. I pushed the papers back to him. He picked them up, checking the signature. He paused. He frowned slightly. For a second, he saw something he did not recognize. He saw the handwriting of a predator, not a prey. He muttered, "Since when do you write like that? Looks like you have been practicing." He shrugged it off. His arrogance blinded him to the warning signs. He shoved the papers into his briefcase. He said, "Good. You made the right choice. Pack your bag, Sarah. I want you gone by the time I get back tomorrow. Leave the keys on the table." He turned on his heel and walked out of the kitchen whistling. He felt light. He felt free. He thought he had just cut off a dead limb. I watched him go. I listened to the front door close. He thinks he has just secured his freedom. He thinks he has protected his future wealth from me. The irony is delicious. By making me sign those papers, he has legally severed the only tie that obligated me to show him any mercy. As his wife, I had a duty of care. As his ex-wife, I have only a duty to destroy the competition. I stood up and walked to the window. The rain had stopped. The city was waiting. I whispered, "Thank you for setting me free, Mark. Now I have no ethical barriers left to destroy you." The moment the front door clicked shut, the silence in the house changed. It was no longer the silence of a prison. It was the silence of a stage before the curtain rises. I walked into the bathroom. The mirror was cracked in the corner, a detail I had left intentionally to add to the aesthetic of poverty. I looked at the woman in the reflection, Sarah Reynolds, the tired wife, the doormat. I looked at her one last time. I whispered, "Goodbye, Sarah Reynolds. You served your purpose." I reached for the hem of that hateful grey cardigan. I peeled it off like dead skin. I took off the cheap polyester blouse that made my skin itch. I took off the scuffed slippers. I bundled them all up into a ball and dropped them into the bin. They landed with a soft, pathetic thud. I turned on the shower. I scrubbed away the smell of burnt toast and cheap cleaning products. I washed away 3 years of humiliation. When I stepped out, I did not reach for a towel. I reached for the garment bag hanging on the back of the door. Sebastian had delivered it while Mark was distracted with his loan application. I unzipped the bag. The sound was sharp like a blade cutting through silk. Inside hung the armour. It was a gown custom-made by Alexander McQueen, black velvet, deep and dark as a starless night. It was structured to perfection, designed to command attention, not ask for it. I slipped it on. The fabric hugged my body, reminding me of who I actually am. I am not a housewife. I am a predator in haute couture. Next came the jewellery. I opened the small velvet box. The sterling emeralds. My great-grandmother wore these when she dined with Churchill. Mark thinks emeralds are just green stones. He does not know the weight of history these stones carry. I fastened the necklace. The cold, heavy gems settled against my throat like a promise of vengeance. I looked in the mirror again. The transformation was physical, but the real change was in the eyes. The dullness was gone. In its place was the steel gaze of the shadow CEO. I cleared my throat. For 3 years, I have pitched my voice higher, softer, more unsure. The voice of a woman who is afraid to take up space. I took a deep breath, engaging my diaphragm. I lowered my register. I switched into the clipped, precise tones of received pronunciation, the accent of the British ruling class. I said to the mirror, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you are ready for the slaughter." My phone buzzed. It was Sebastian. "The carriage awaits, madam." I walked out of the house. I did not lock the door. I do not care what happens to this hovel anymore. Outside, the rain was falling softly over London, but I did not get wet. Sebastian was there, standing by the curb, holding a large black umbrella. Beside him sat the Rolls-Royce Phantom, engine purring like a tamed beast. Sebastian opened the rear door. "You look formidable, Madam Chairman." I slid into the leather interior. The air inside smelled of rich mahogany and leather, not onions and damp walls. The door closed, sealing out the noise of the common world. I leaned back. I watched the rain streak against the tinted window. We began to move, gliding effortlessly through the streets of London, heading towards the West End, heading towards Mark. I touched the emerald around my neck. I said, "Drive, Sebastian, and do not spare the horses. My husband is waiting to meet his boss." Do you want to see the look on everyone's face when the shadow CEO arrives? Comment number 2 to enter the ballroom. The Rolls-Royce glided to a halt at the private rear entrance of the Grosvenor House Hotel. While the regular employees, including my husband, were queuing at the front, hoping to get a glimpse of a celebrity, I was ushered in through the velvet ropes of the owner's entrance. Security guards who looked like they were carved out of granite bowed their heads as I passed. They did not ask for ID. They know exactly who pays their mortgages. I took the private lift to the mezzanine level. The doors opened with a soft chime, and I stepped out onto the glass balcony that overlooks the grand ballroom. From up here, the party looked like a glittering sea of black tuxedos and designer gowns. The air smelled of expensive lilies and even more expensive ambition. 500 people, the elite of London's business world. And somewhere down there, in that crushing crowd, was Mark. It did not take me long to find him. He stood out, not because he was shining, but because he was trying too hard. There is a distinct difference between wealth and money. Wealth whispers, money screams, and Mark was screaming. He was standing near the ice sculpture, cornering Mr. Henderson, the chief financial officer. I watched Mark's body language. He was leaning in too close, invading Henderson's personal space. He was using big, expansive hand gestures, knocking into a waiter passing by with a tray of canapés. He was laughing too loudly at a joke that likely was not even funny. I could see Mr. Henderson's face. He wore that tight, polite smile that British people use when they want to tell you to go to hell, but are too well bred to say it. He was looking over Mark's shoulder, desperately searching for an exit strategy. Mark, oblivious as always, thought he was charming the man. He thought he was networking. In reality, he was suffocating him. And then there was Chloe. She was standing next to him, clutching onto his arm like a decorative accessory. She looked terrified. She was out of her depth, and she knew it. She was holding her champagne flute by the bowl, warming the vintage Krug with her sweaty palms instead of holding it by the stem. A rookie mistake, a cardinal sin in this room. She looked around the room with wide, hungry eyes, clearly calculating the cost of the chandeliers, the flowers, the dresses. She did not belong here. She looked like a tourist who had wandered into a coronation. I leaned against the glass railing, sipping a glass of sparkling water. I felt like a naturalist observing a rare and confused species in the wild, the lesser-spotted social climber. I whispered to myself, "Oh, Mark, you look like a court jester trying to audition for the role of king. Do you not see how they look at you? They are not impressed. They are tolerating you." I watched as Mark pulled out a business card and tried to force it into Mr. Henderson's top pocket. Henderson recoiled slightly, stepping back. He checked his watch, muttered something that was undoubtedly a lie about needing to find his wife, and walked away briskly. Mark did not even register the rejection. He turned to Chloe and beamed. I could almost hear him bragging. "See that, babe? I just secured the CFO. We are in." "No, Mark. You are out. You just do not know it yet." A hush began to fall over the room. The string quartet stopped playing. The lights in the massive chandeliers began to dim slowly, plunging the ballroom into a dramatic twilight. The murmur of the crowd died down. 500 faces turned towards the main stage. They were waiting. They were waiting for the shadow CEO. They were waiting for the legend. Mark grabbed Chloe's hand, squeezing it tight. He was practically vibrating with excitement. He adjusted his tie one last time. He licked his lips. He was ready to meet his idol. He was ready to meet his destiny. I handed my water glass to Sebastian, who was standing silently in the shadows behind me. I said, "It is time." I turned away from the balcony and walked towards the backstage stairs. The click of my heels on the metal steps sounded like the ticking of a clock, counting down the final seconds of Mark's career. I reached the wings of the stage. A technician handed me a microphone. He looked nervous. Everyone is nervous around Sarah Sterling. I looked out at the dark silhouette of the audience. I could not see Mark anymore, but I could feel his anticipation. He is expecting a saviour. He is expecting a mentor. I switched the microphone on. The small green light flickered to life. I whispered into the darkness, "Showtime." The host's voice boomed through the speakers, echoing off the vaulted ceiling. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for your chairman and CEO, Mrs. Sarah Sterling." The applause was polite at first, then raucous. The heavy velvet curtains parted. I stepped out of the shadows and into the blinding white heat of the spotlight. Click, click, click. My heels struck the stage floor with a rhythm that demanded silence. And silence is exactly what I got. I walked to the centre of the stage. I gripped the lectern. I looked out into the sea of faces. I saw the shock ripple through the front row. I saw Mr. Henderson, the CFO, drop his canapé. I saw the board of directors straighten their ties. They knew who I was. They had just never seen me in the flesh. But my eyes were fixed on only one person, Mark. He was standing in the third row. He was frozen. His champagne glass was halfway to his mouth, tilted at a dangerous angle. Amber liquid was dripping onto his rented tuxedo, but he did not notice. He was staring at me with the expression of a man whose brain had just short-circuited. He blinked. Once. Twice. He shook his head violently, as if trying to clear a hallucination. He turned to Chloe. I could see his lips moving. He said, "Chloe, pinch me. I think the champagne is off. That woman up there, she looks exactly like my wife." Chloe stared at me, then back at Mark. She looked confused. She said, "Do not be stupid, Mark. Your wife is a frump. That woman is majestic." Mark laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical giggle that cut through the silence of the room. He pointed a shaking finger at the stage. He shouted, "Sarah!" The room turned to look at him. 500 heads swiveled in unison. He shouted again, louder this time. "Sarah, what on earth do you think you are doing?" He pushed his way past a waiter stepping into the aisle. He was not scared, he was angry. In his small, arrogant mind, I was not the CEO. I was his disobedient wife who had gatecrashed his big night. He yelled, "You have lost your mind, haven't you? You followed me here. Where did you steal that dress? Take it off immediately. You look ridiculous." The crowd gasped. A ripple of whispers broke out. Who is that man? Is he drunk? Why is he shouting at the chairman? I did not move. I did not flinch. I let him dig his grave. I let him show everyone exactly who he is. Mark marched towards the stage, his face red with embarrassment and rage. He stopped right at the foot of the stairs, looking up at me. He hissed, "Get down here right now, before security throws you out. You are embarrassing me. Go home and clean the kitchen." I leaned forward slightly towards the microphone. The sound system amplified my breath, my presence filling every corner of the room. I spoke. My voice was not the voice of Sarah the wife. It was the voice of God. I said, "Is there a problem, Mr. Reynolds?" The use of his surname hit him like a physical slap. He recoiled. He blinked again, trying to reconcile the woman in the velvet gown with the woman who scrubs his floors. He stammered, "Mr. Reynolds, why are you calling me that? I am your husband. Stop this acting. It is not funny. Tell them who you are. Tell them you are just a housewife." I smiled. It was a cold, predatory smile. I said, "Oh, I intend to tell them exactly who I am. But first, I think you should check your tie. You have spilled champagne on it. It is very unprofessional." Mark looked down at his chest. He looked back up at me. Panic was starting to set in. The denial was cracking at the edges. He looked around the room, seeking allies. He looked at Mr. Henderson. He said, "Mr. Henderson, tell her. Tell this crazy woman to get off the stage. She is my wife. She is having a breakdown." Mr. Henderson did not speak. He stepped back, distancing himself from the blast radius. He looked at Mark with pure pity. Mark looked back at me. His eyes were wide, pleading for logic where there was none. He said, "Sarah, please, the joke is over. You are not the CEO. You are nobody." I stood tall. I gripped the edges of the lectern until my knuckles turned white. I said, "You are mistaken, Mark. You are the nobody. I am the Sterling Group, and you are trespassing in my kingdom." Do you want to see the moment the denial turns into terror? Comment number 2 right now. The show is just beginning. Mark realized that denial was no longer working. He saw the murmurs in the crowd. He saw the confusion on the faces of the board members. He knew he had to pivot. And Mark Reynolds is a master of the pivot. He scrambled up the steps onto the stage. He did not attack me. Instead, he walked straight to the podium. He grabbed the microphone stand with both hands, his knuckles white. He looked out at the audience, with tears welling in his eyes, fake tears, the kind he used to use to get out of paying parking tickets. He spoke, his voice trembling with manufactured emotion. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, please forgive my wife. She is unwell. Seeing me here tonight on the brink of this great promotion, it must have triggered an episode. But I love her. I have always loved her." He looked at me with a look of pure condescension. He continued, "Success is nothing without family, and at Sterling Group we value honesty, we value loyalty. I have spent every waking hour working for this company, sacrificing my time, my energy, to build the North London branch into a powerhouse. I did it for the shareholders. I did it for you. And I did it to support my poor, fragile wife." The crowd quieted down. He was good. I will give him that. He was a snake, but he was a charming snake. He was spinning a narrative where he was the martyr and I was the burden. I let him finish. I let him hang himself with his own words. When he finally stopped to take a breath, waiting for applause, I stepped forward. I did not shout. I did not scream. I simply leaned into my microphone. I said, "You mention honesty, Mark. You mention loyalty to the shareholders." Mark nodded, looking solemn. He said, "Integrity is my core value, Sarah. You know that." I smiled. I said, "Then let us see how much integrity you have when you think no one is watching. Technical team, play the video, file named The Real Mark." The massive LED screen behind us flickered to life. The room went dark. Grainy footage from a hidden camera appeared. It was our living room. The timestamp was from 3 weeks ago. On the screen, Mark was sprawling on the sofa, holding a glass of whiskey in one hand and Clary in the other. I was in the background, on my hands and knees scrubbing a stain out of the carpet. The audio was crystal clear. "Video," Mark said. "Look at her, Chloe, scrubbing away like the peasant she is. God, I cannot wait to get rid of her." "Video," Chloe giggled. "She works hard for you, baby." "Video," Mark sneered. "She is an embarrassment. But I need to keep up the act a little longer, just until I fool those dinosaurs on the board. The Sterling Group is full of idiots. The shareholders are senile old fools who wouldn't know a good deal if it bit them on the backside." The audience in the ballroom gasped, a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the room. "Video," Mark continued. "I am going to bleed this company dry. Once I get that promotion, I will funnel the accounts into my offshore shell. I will strip the assets and leave the carcass for the vultures. And then I will dump Sarah and we will live like kings in Dubai." The video cut to black. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. I looked at the board of directors in the front row. Their faces were purple with rage. Mr. Henderson looked like he was about to have a stroke. Mark had just called the most powerful people in London idiots and dinosaurs. Mark stood on stage, his mouth opening and closing like a goldfish. He looked at the screen, then at the crowd, then at me. He stammered, "It is a deep fake. It is AI. I never said that." I stepped closer to him. I said, "We have audio analysis to prove otherwise, Mark. You just threatened to embezzle from the company. You just insulted the board, and you just admitted to using me." Mark's face twisted. The charm evaporated. The mask fell off completely, and the monster underneath clawed its way out. He lunged towards me, pointing a shaking finger in my face. He screamed, "You trapped me! This is entrapment! Why did you do this? Why did you hide who you were?" I answered calmly, because I needed to know if you were a man worth saving. Mark laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. He shouted, "Worth saving? You are the one who destroyed me. If you were so powerful, Sarah, why didn't you help me? You watched me struggle for 3 years. You sat on your throne of gold while I worked my fingers to the bone. You let me start at the bottom. You forced me to cheat. You forced me to find comfort with Chloe because you were too busy playing your little game." He turned to the audience, spreading his arms wide, playing the victim one last time. He yelled, "She is the villain here. She could have made me a director on day 1, but she held me back. Any talent I have, any success I achieved, I had to fight for it, despite her." I cut him off. My voice was like a whip crack. I said, "Talent? Did you just say talent?" Mark puffed out his chest. "My numbers do not lie. I tripled the sales. I wrote the strategy that saved the quarter. I am the best thing that happened to this company." I laughed. It was a dark, hollow laugh that echoed off the walls. I said, "Mark, you are delusional. Do you really think you wrote those strategies?" He looked confused. "Of course I did." I shook my head. I said, "Do you remember those nights you fell asleep at the kitchen table, drunk and exhausted, leaving your laptop open with a half-written report full of spelling errors and logical fallacies? Who do you think finished them?" Mark blinked. I thought I finished them in the morning." I said, "No, Mark, I finished them. Every night for 3 years, I waited until you passed out. Then I sat at your computer and I rewrote your garbage. I fixed your math. I corrected your grammar. I injected actual market analysis into your childish ramblings. Those strategies that got you praised, they were mine." Mark stepped back, looking like he had been punched in the gut. I continued, "And your assistant, David, the brilliant young man who always seemed to know exactly what to say to clients, the one who prepared your meeting notes, the one who stopped you from signing illegal contracts." Mark whispered, "David is loyal to me." I said, "David is my personal executive aide. I planted him there to babysit you. I paid his salary. His job was to make sure you didn't accidentally bankrupt the branch with your incompetence." I walked right up to him, invading his space. I looked him dead in the eye. I said, "You have no talent, Mark. You have no vision. You are not a leader. You are a puppet. I carved you out of wood. I painted a smile on your face, and I have been pulling the strings for 3 years to make you dance." The realization hit him. I saw it in his eyes, the total destruction of his ego. He wasn't a victim. He wasn't a hero. He was a fraud, a charity case. He fell to his knees. It wasn't a theatrical fall this time. His legs just gave out. He whispered, You did everything?" I looked down at him with zero sympathy. I said, "Yes, and now I am cutting the strings." I turned to the microphone, addressing the room. I said, "Mrs. Wilson from Human Resources is in the room, I believe." A terrified woman in the second row stood up. "Yes, Madam Chairman," I said. "Mark Reynolds is terminated, effective immediately. Cause for termination, gross misconduct, attempted embezzlement, and public disparagement of the company. Oh, and fraud regarding his work performance." I looked back at Mark, huddled on the floor. I said, "Security, remove this trespasser from my building." 2 massive guards stepped onto the stage. They grabbed Mark by the arms, dragging him up. He didn't fight. He was too broken. He just stared at me, his mouth open, his world ending. As they dragged him away, I leaned into the mic one last time. I said, "And Mark, Do not forget to return the company car. You are walking home tonight. The spectacle was not quite over. As the security guards hauled Mark towards the exit, Mrs. Wilson from Human Resources raised her hand. She is a woman of strict protocol, and she had one final nail to hammer into the coffin of Mark's career. She walked to the edge of the stage, holding a tablet. Her voice was calm and administrative, cutting through the tension like a knife. She said, "One moment, please, gentlemen. Before Mr. Reynolds is removed from the premises, there is a matter of company assets." The guards stopped. Mark hung between them, his feet dragging on the floor. His expensive tuxedo rumpled and stained. He looked up at Mrs. Wilson with a glimmer of hope. Perhaps he thought she was going to save him. Mrs. Wilson adjusted her glasses. She said, "Mr. Reynolds, our system shows that you recently secured a personal loan of £50,000 through Obsidian Trust, a firm which, as the chairman noted, is a subsidiary of our holdings." Mark nodded frantically. Yes, I can pay it back. Just give me time." Mrs. Wilson shook her head. "I am afraid not. Clause 4B of your loan agreement states that in the event of termination for misconduct, the full amount plus interest is due immediately. Since you do not have the funds in your account, we are exercising our right to seize collateral." Mark turned pale. "Collateral? I didn't put up any collateral." Mrs. Wilson tapped her screen. "You pledged your personal assets. The lease on your Mercedes has been cancelled. Your watch has been flagged for repossession. And your bank accounts have been frozen, pending an audit for embezzlement. Effectively, Mr. Reynolds, you are bankrupt." The word hung in the air. Bankrupt. That was the trigger. That was the moment the final rat jumped from the sinking ship. Chloe, who had been standing by the ice sculpture, trying to make herself invisible, suddenly marched forward. The fear in her eyes was replaced by pure fury. She wasn't angry that Mark was a cheater. She was angry that he was poor. She walked right up to Mark. She looked at him with the kind of disgust usually reserved for insects. She screamed, "You liar! You told me you were rich. You told me you ran this place." Mark reached out to her, desperate for a lifeline. "Chloe, baby, it is a mistake. We can fix this. I still have—" Smack! The sound of her hand connecting with his cheek echoed across the silent ballroom. It was a sharp, vicious slap. Chloe shouted, "You have nothing. You are nothing. I wasted 3 months on a loser. Do not ever call me again." She turned on her heel. She grabbed her fake Hermes bag and stormed out of the ballroom, her heels clicking a furious rhythm on the marble floor. She didn't look back. She didn't care. Mark watched her go. He watched his last illusion walk out the door. He looked around the room. 500 people were staring at him. Former colleagues, rivals, bosses. No one stepped forward to help. No one offered a hand. They just watched. The guards tightened their grip. One of them grunted, "Let's go, mate. You are making a scene." They dragged him backwards. Mark's heels skidded on the polished floor. He stopped fighting. His head dropped to his chest. He was a broken man, a hollow shell in a rented suit. High above on the stage, I watched it all. I did not smile. I did not frown. I felt light. A waiter appeared at my side with a silver tray. "Champagne, Madam Chairman?" I reached out and took a crystal flute. The bubbles rose to the surface, sparkling in the spotlight. I took a sip. It was crisp and cold. I tasted the wine, but underneath it I tasted something else. the sweet, metallic taste of victory mixed with the bitter aftertaste of 3 wasted years. It was the taste of chemotherapy, the poison that kills the cancer to save the patient. I looked down at Mark as he was shoved through the double doors at the back of the hall. The doors swung shut, swallowing him into the night. I lowered my glass. I whispered, "Goodbye, Mark. Rest in peace." The room was still silent, waiting for my cue. I turned back to the microphone. I said, "Now that the rubbish has been taken out, shall we proceed with dinner? I believe the lobster is excellent tonight." Do you want to see what happens when a man loses everything and realizes he has nowhere to go? Comment number 3 for the aftermath. The double doors of the hotel service exit slammed shut. The sound was final, like the closing of a prison gate. Mark landed on the wet pavement of Park Lane. He stumbled, his expensive leather soles slipping on the slick concrete. He fell onto his hands and knees into a puddle of dirty rainwater. The streetlights above buzzed, bathing him in a sickly yellow glow. He stood up, brushing the grit off his rented tuxedo. He looked around. No paparazzi, no admirers, just a few black cabs speeding past, splashing water onto his trousers. He reached into his pocket for his phone. He needed to call a car. He needed to get away. The phone vibrated. Once, twice, 3 times. A barrage of notifications. He looked at the screen. The light illuminated his face, which was pale and twisted with panic. Message 1 from Obsidian Trust. Dear Mr. Reynolds, per clause 4B of your agreement, your loan is now in default due to termination of employment. Immediate repayment of £70,000, including interest and penalties, is required. Message 2 from his personal bank. Account overdrawn. Your assets have been frozen by court order. Message 3 from the luxury car rental agency. Vehicle disablement activated. Location tracked. Recovery team dispatched. Mark looked up. The Rolls-Royce Phantom he had rented, the symbol of his fake success, was parked just 10 meters away. He ran towards it. He grabbed the handle. He pulled frantically. Locked. He pressed the key fob. Nothing. The car sat there silent and mocking. The engine had been remotely disabled. He was locked out of the vehicle he had leveraged his life to rent. He screamed, a raw, guttural sound that was swallowed by the noise of the London traffic. He kicked the tyre, once, twice, until his foot throbbed with pain. He checked his Uber app. Payment method declined. He checked his pockets. No cash. He had tipped the valet his last £20 upon arrival, thinking he was a big shot. He had no choice. He had to walk. The walk from Mayfair to our house in the suburbs is long. It began to rain again, a cold, relentless drizzle that soaked through his thin dress shirt. I imagine him walking. I imagine the blisters forming on his feet inside those tight shoes. I imagine him passing by the warm-lit windows of restaurants, seeing people eating, people laughing, people living the life he thought he was entitled to. A tuxedo is a strange garment. In a ballroom, it makes you look like a prince. But walking alone on the side of a highway in the rain, it makes you look like a drunk, like a failure. 2 hours later, he finally turned onto our street. He was limping. His hair was plastered to his forehead. He was shivering violently. He saw the house. The lights were off. It looked dark and uninviting. But to him, it was shelter. It was the only thing he had left. He ran up the driveway. He fumbled for his keys, his hands shaking so much he dropped them twice. He finally jammed the key into the lock. He turned it. It didn't move. He frowned. He tried again. He jiggled it. He pushed it. Nothing. He stepped back and looked at the door. The wood looked different. The brass fitting was shiny and new. I had called the locksmith 20 minutes after he left for the party. I told him I had lost my keys and needed a high-security barrel installed immediately. Mark pounded on the door with his fist. He shouted, "Sarah!" Sarah opened the door. "It is me. It is Mark. I know you are in there. Please, it is freezing." Inside the house, I sat in the armchair by the window in the dark. I held a glass of red wine. I watched his silhouette through the curtains. I did not move. I did not feel pity. I felt the satisfaction of a mathematician who has just balanced a complex equation. He shouted again, his voice cracking. "Sarah, I have nowhere to go. They took everything. Please, I am your husband." I took a sip of wine. I whispered to the empty room, "No, Mark, you were my husband. Now you are just a trespasser." He pounded for another 10 minutes until his energy ran out. He slid down the door, collapsing onto the welcome mat. The mat that used to say, "Home sweet home." I threw that away too. The new mat simply says, "No solicitors." He curled up into a ball, shivering in his ruined tuxedo, hugging his knees like a child. The king of the Sterling Group, the man with the vision, sleeping on a doormat in the rain. Do you want to see the final chapter of this story? Comment number 4 for the resolution. It has been exactly 30 days since the night of the gala. London is moving fast, as always. The rain has stopped and the spring sun is shining on the glass facade of the Sterling Tower. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of my office on the 45th floor. The city looked like a circuit board from up here, organised, efficient, small. Behind me, the boardroom was buzzing with activity. The quarterly strategy meeting was in full swing. Mr. Henderson was presenting the projected growth figures. He was nervous. He knows I do not tolerate errors anymore, not after the last 3 years. He cleared his throat. "Madam Chairman, regarding the North London branch, since the restructuring, revenue has increased by 40%. The new management team is performing exceptionally well." I nodded without turning around. "Excellent. Proceed to the next item." My eyes drifted down to the street below. From this height, people are just ants, scuttling about their meaningless little lives. But my eyes caught one specific figure. He was standing on the corner near the subway entrance. He was wearing a coat that was too thin for the weather. He was holding a stack of bright yellow flyers. Cheap advertisements for a cash-for-gold shop, or perhaps a predatory loan shark. He stopped a businessman in a suit, trying to hand him a flyer. The businessman brushed him off with a look of annoyance, stepping around him as if he were a pile of rubbish. The man on the corner slumped his shoulders. He looked up at the tower, shielding his eyes from the sun. It was Mark. I did not need binoculars to know it was him. I know that slump. I know that defeat. It is the posture of a man who realized too late that he was never the main character in his own life. He looked up at my window. Of course, he could not see me. The glass is tinted. To him, I am just a reflection of the sky he can never reach. To me, he is just a speck of dust on the pavement. For a second, I wondered if I should feel something. Pity, perhaps, or maybe a flicker of nostalgia for the 3 years we shared. I searched my heart. I searched for a single drop of emotion. I found nothing. It was clean. It was empty. It was peaceful. Mr. Henderson's voice broke the silence. Madam Chairman, we are awaiting your decision on the asset liquidation proposal. Should we proceed with cutting the dead weight? I turned away from the window. I turned my back on the street. I turned my back on Mark. I walked to the head of the table. I placed my hands on the mahogany surface. I looked at my team, my empire. I said, "Yes, Mr. Henderson, proceed immediately. In business as in life, one must be ruthless about removing non-performing assets. If it does not bring value, get rid of it." I sat down. The leather chair was comfortable. The power fit me like a glove. I picked up my pen, ready to sign the next £1 billion deal. But before I did, I allowed myself one final thought, one final message to the man shivering on the street corner below. I whispered, "Goodbye, Mark. Thank you for the most valuable lesson you ever taught me. A woman does not need a prince. She needs an empire of her own." This is Sarah Sterling, signing off.